Hi guys, as you may know, Angular and React have been the subject of a heated debate for years, which one is better, why, and so on. And on the web you can find plenty of articles which give you a list of pros and cons of each of them, but I would like to give you a comparison from the developer's point of view. So I will code a few examples, each example twice, once in React and once in Angular. And in these examples, I want to focus on key features used on a daily basis by every front-end engineer, which are property binding, event handling, lazy loading, state management, and more, and utilities provided by Angular and React to take advantage of these features. Welcome on board. Let's get started. Let's start with React. I have a new React app created with create React app 341. So in React, when we want to add a class to a div, we can't use class. We have to use class name, as class is a keyword in pure JavaScript, and since JSX is an extension of JavaScript, a different name has to be used. So let's add a class app to this div. So as you can see, the class has been applied, and we have some basic styling, which I define here. But what if we wanted to bind a variable here? We can use the curly braces and name of the property. So this CLS is this CLS. And it works the same way for state. So I have a state initialized in the constructor, and I can use it like that. So now this is this. And of course, for props, it works exactly the same way. So I have a CLS props defined here on the person component, and inside that component, I use it like this, props CLS. And let's say that I want to have two classes, one which comes from a variable and a second one which is just fixed text. I can do it like that. Add curly braces, and then inside dollar and curly braces, I can put my variable, not this, prop CLS, and outside I can add second class. As you can see, we have both classes applied here. I have two persons here, one which is directly in the app component and one which is a standalone component, which I define here. And even though I only import CSS here, I have no CSS imported here, both this and this person are affected by these properties. So by default, these styles which I import here are global, and this may often be an issue, and there are two popular ways of dealing with that in React. The first one is Css Modules, and the second one is styled components. Let's take a look at CSS Modules first. In order to use CSS Modules, we have to change the name of this file to app module as CSS. Then we can import styles from that module. And this name is up to you, you can pick whatever you want. And then instead of this class, let's use our styles object and app class. So as you can see, a new class has been applied, and it is different than what we have here. We have an additional underscore and some random hash. So it is the way CSS modules work. They add a random hash to classes which come from CSS modules to make sure that they are unique in the application. But as you can see, our styling is partially broken, and that is because here we are using input container and this class does not exist anymore. Let's use our new object. So again, now it is app input container with some hash and so on. And as you can see, using dashes in your class name is not really convenient with CSS modules, as we have to use the square brackets syntax. Okay, and same for person. Now everything works, but as you can see here, we have the person class, but the styling is not applied to this element, but still, if I wanted to, I can apply. But now I have to do that explicitly, and styles are only applied where I want them to be applied. Let's move on to styled components. They are not built in, so we have to install an additional package. Now we can import and create our styled component. Our styling goes inside backticks. And now we can use the styled div instead of this div. So as you can see, our styling is partially broken. That is because we are still using styles object. So everything works again, except here we have a typo. So now it works. This person is still affected, but it is only affected because it is inside of the styled div. So if I had another div here with a person inside, and we have to use React fragment, as we can't have two parallel divs in return. So now we have an additional person up here. And as you can see, that person is not affected by the styles coming from here or here. There is one more thing related with styled components I would like to show you. So let's say that we want to have a red border around the input. So we can add one pixel solid border, and instead of hard coding the color, let's use something like this. So now this is connected to the props which we add to the style div. So if I add color props here, which is red, then I have a red border. So you can use props inside your CSS block of styled component. Another approach is, I think, one of the most fundamental ways of dealing with styling in React. So let's create an object. So we have an object with one CSS property, and we can use this object like this. So we have the yellow background, and this approach is sometimes very handy as it is quick, but it has its limitations. For example, we can't use pseudo selectors with it, like hover or active and so on, but you can do that with CSS modules and styled components. Time for Angular. I took our code from React and placed it here, and of course we have some compilation errors, so let's fix them, and then let's focus on how we deal with styling and property binding in Angular. So first of all, let's get rid of the errors. So in Angular we can't use React fragment, and we don't need to. We can have parallel components out of the box. What else? We don't have styled div anymore, so let's replace it with regular div. Class name can be simply be a class. Also, this syntax won't work here, and person is not person anymore. It's up person. When you create a component using Angular CLI, so you do something like ng-generate component test. It has automatically a prefix appended to the selector, and this prefix can be configured here. But anyway, I don't need that component. In person, we should remove this, and actually let's remove all of that. We will add classes later. And here person should be app person, and same here. So errors are gone, but we don't see any styling even though we have some classes applied. And let's also apply the app class here. But anyway, we need to copy the styles from the React app, and let's paste them here. Okay, we have 100 view height property on the app class, and now we have 2 app classes, so let's remove this one. Okay, and we are good to go. So we have the app class here, and we also have a property with that string, so let's bind them together. We can do it like that, CLS. We can also add a second class here after variable. And let me quickly adjust our styling. So we have both classes applied here. Instead of class, we could also use ng class. And there are a couple of ways to use it. We could, for example, define an array. We still have the classes. We could actually use them even together. So there are many combinations. You can also have an object. Let's say we want app class, if true, and this true can be bound to variable, of course, so we can have is app or whatever logic you need which returns true or false. And negation. We can also simply use just string. I think that Angular's equivalent of React style is simply ng-style. Here we can also have an object with a property. So it works, and I think we could even use the same syntax as we did in React. Yeah, still works. But if I did it with a dash here without quotes, then not anymore. Of course, it doesn't have to be inline. We can have an object here. Still works. Let's go back to React for a second. There is one thing I would like to bring your attention to. So here I have React app, and here I have React code. So we have that person here, which is a div and h2, and this is that person. So you can see that the person tag is not present in the DOM. But back to Angular again, we have a person here, and in that case, app person is present. So how about styling host components? Let's go to person component and add host selector here. And let's change display to block and maybe add some border. The border has been applied here to the host element. There is one more interesting selector, which is host context. And here we can place a name of tag of the parent or a class of the parent and so on. Let me show you an example. So let's say that I add here test class with background color blue and another class with background color gray. Now, if we go back to app component and add class test1 here, you can see that this is now blue. And let's add test2 here. So now this is the host of this person, which is this role. And this is the host of this person, which is connected to this role. Further to this, let's take a look at so-called host binding. So I bind to style transform and I set it to scale 1. So if we have 1, we can't see any difference, but if I change it to 0.5, then we can see that persons are half the size. And I think that we forgot to mention how to handle this CLS thing. So in React, we used props for this. So we passed a CLS prop to the person component, and then we use that in person to add the class. But here we have to handle it a bit differently. So in the component, we have to add input. And now we can use that in the component. So we can see that we have the person class here on the on this div. And if I remove it, then the class is gone. Bring it back, the class is here. We have two separate decorators now, but Angular allows us to combine them and create one more powerful decorator. So let's take this input, or actually let's copy it, but remove all of that and just keep the transform. So now in our app component, we can use the transform property and set it to scale 0.5. So we can see now we have only affected this person because we only set it here. And the second person still has the default scale of 1. Last but not least, scopes of the CSS files. So in the app component, I have this style sheet, and in the HTML we have this person and it has the white background which is set here. This person only has the gray background because we set it here in the person component. If I remove it, you can see that it has no background at all. It is transparent. So this background color property has no effect on this person because it is in a different standalone component. So if I want to make my styles global, I can do that by taking them from here and placing them here in styles as CSS. This file is by default created by the Angular CLI when you create a new project, and is often used to define some global styles. So that's one way of doing that. And you can see that now each person, so this one, and this one has the white background. Another possibility is to change the encapsulation property of the component. So let's remove that from here. We have no white backgrounds, and go to here and add a property, encapsulation, and we can set it to one of 4 possibilities. Let's choose none. Now, if I place the person class here, we have 2 white backgrounds. This person is not affected because it is not in the app class. It is here. But if I took it from here and place it here, then all of them have white background. So as you can see, using view encapsulation none is a bit different than placing a CSS in this global file. But anyway, the point is that Angular gives us some flexibility here, and it is important to know that there is such a property. I won't dive into all the possibilities, but I encourage you to refer to the documentation for further information.